So my name's Roger Green, and I've been the founder and director of the Academy Healing Nutrition for 35 plus years. So I've been doing this for a long, long time. And essentially, the influences in this curriculum that I created many decades ago were Chinese medicine. So my background is in Chinese medicine. And then 40 odd years ago, I read the writings of Weston Price, W-E-S-T-O-N Price, who was the dentist in the 1930s, who traveled to cultures of longevity, dozens of them, about 20 odd, and he documented them really, really, really well, right? And so those books actually went very, very unnoticed, except for a handful of people. And then, of course, later on, those books became more like modern books that were referred to as the blue zone cultures, blue zone diets. The modern writings were a little bit manipulated in the wrong way, if you ask me, in the some of the details of that, because the authors were a little bit more obsessed with the so-called low-fat diet. So they were trying to bend the facts and figures that Weston Price in the 1930s clearly demonstrated. He was a remarkable man, and him and his wife every summer would travel to a culture of longevity. And remember, this is before the Second World War, and you could still visit cultures of longevity that weren't contaminated by the industrialized, westernized diet. And, you know, those days you'd have to catch the ship and the donkey and live up in the mountains for, you know, a good 2 to 3 months of the year. And he was a dentist, and he couldn't figure out why Americans' dental health was getting so bad. This was even in the 1930s, right? And so he became obsessed with that. And that's why he ended up traveling to these cultures of longevity. And basically, in a nutshell, he discovered the nutrient-dense diets of traditional people. Now, sometimes modern writers call that ancestral diets, etc. A lot of these people, modern writers, should actually come clean and refer back. They don't, they're a bit naughty. They should refer back to the original writings of Weston Price, because he was the guy that nailed it. And a lot of the so-called ancestral modern authors using that material, they don't even, you know, recognize them. Anyway, the Weston Price Foundation is a grassroots movement, pretty much well established in America, but also has chapters all over the world, in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, you name it, right? Where people are starting to get in touch with real food again. Now, my curriculum is a little bit more innovative than just the Weston Price, because what they don't have, they don't have the energetics. They don't have the yin and yang and the 5 elements and the tonic herbal medicine philosophy of internal medicine, right? So what I did was I combined Ayurvedic, traditional Chinese medicine, some aspects of macrobiotics, because you have to remember in the 1970s, there was only 2 things that you could study as far as food was medicine, and that was macrobiotics or the Rudolf Steiner movement. And I take my hat off to those guys, because they basically created this revolution in organic farming and the natural foods movement. When I was living in London in the late 70s, there was like 2 health food stores, right? And you had to get there by 11 o'clock, otherwise all the organic vegetables were gone, right? And so I became a bit of a pioneer of natural foods. I studied in London at the East West Centre, studied shiatsu and so forth, but then I formulated my studies more in traditional Chinese medicine. And I started one of Sydney's holistic health centres called the Glebe Healing Centre. Again, this was way back then when they didn't really exist, but we were the kind of first to pull together things like acupuncture and chiropractor, naturopathy. And of course, I was doing the nutritional counseling for cancer, HIV, etc. And then essentially what happened was people really needed the practical side of this. You know, you can talk about food as medicine and all these new ingredients, but until people get to see it and taste it and eat it. So I built a cooking school, and I think I've been building cooking schools for the last 40 years. I've ended up doing that all over the world. So this curriculum ended up being in, for a while, San Francisco, London, New York, Prague, pretty much all over the world. But in the last year or so, we've put it completely online, and we made that transition really, really well, that in the sense that we kept the essence of this training, which was, yes, you learn some theory and philosophy, but then it gets grounded in a cooking class, right? Where you get to eat it and taste it and experiment with it, right? So unlike other nutritional trainings where it's just a lot of theory and a lot of left brain, you know, and reductionist thinking, you know, we keep the left-right brain going very, very well, plus we ground it all the time with practical work and practical classes, which we've successfully been able to do over online Zoom format very successfully, if you ask me. So there you go. Okay, so today we're talking about what I refer to as the 120 plus protocols. So this concept called JING foods is what we use in Chinese medicine a lot. JING is your inherited constitution. It's your DNA, it's your stem cells. It's the blueprint of what your mother and father's ancestry gave you, plus what your mother was eating through gestation, so the quality and activity of that food, etc., her activity, etc. Even sort of the cosmological energies of the vibration of heaven and the local geographic energies, that all goes into creating your basic constitution. So when we refer to your JING, it's your basic constitution. And when we refer to JING foods, they are foods that really help to restore and rejuvenate your constitution. In a nutshell, natural healing is about looking after your constitution, right? And in a nutshell, guys, very, very simple, living a long, long health span, right, is about looking after your constitution, right? Now, of course, we have dietary therapy for, you know, cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's, you name it, we've got it. But the preventive side of this is all about maintaining your constitutional strengths, right? Now, we're all born with constitutional strengths and weaknesses. In my curriculum, we also study the nature of your constitution. Like you might have heard of the 3 doshas in Ayurvedic, how people are made up of these tendencies of vata, pitta, kapha. So that's one aspect. And then in Chinese medicine, we have the 4 basic types. In the West, we sort of generally refer to this as like the fast metabolism type, the slow metabolism type. You know, some people are more hot in nature, some people are more cool in nature. In the time I have with you today, we don't have time to go down that track of, you know, health assessment, etc. But I think it's a very, very important aspect to actually learn the makeup of your constitution, so you can, and we train people in the foods that help with your particular constitutional tendencies. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to be talking about these powerful herbs of longevity. So in a nutshell, you've got your diet, and of course we're basically teaching a gourmet plant-based diet, but we have absolutely no dogma, and we look at all of the food groups. This is not a vegan course, this is not a vegetarian course, this is not a paleo. There's a way of creating the middle way with all of that and learning the energetics of all of these food groups, because everything is healing, everything is medicine in that sense. Then the next step from the dietary approach is these amazing herbs. And they are clever, they are intelligent, and they are powerful. So if you want to be going into 140, 150, 180 years, you've really, really got to learn about some of these powerful herbs. Now, guys, you don't have to learn 365 herbs that we have in traditional Chinese medicine to make up a formula. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the culinary arts of using these herbs, and you only have to learn 10 or 5. And I'm going to teach you like a handful of today that I've got sitting here that as I put in the promo, you're going to be learning some very, very simple techniques to start to make some broths and some basic teas that you can drink, right? That are very, very life-giving, health-giving, longevity giving. Very, very straightforward. We're also going to be talking about the key things for your immune adaptability and strength. Again, very, very simple. We're going to be talking about astragalus and the medicinal mushrooms. For me, that's the polarity that you start with. Now, sure, add on everything else. You might have come across your zinc and your vitamin D. I don't have time to talk about all of that. My curriculum is actually a 1-year curriculum put into 10 modules, 10 weekends, 1 weekend a month, but it basically takes a year to go through all of these aspects, right? So I am going to be cutting to the chase here and not going into all the other things that you can do for your immune system. But in my opinion, I'm going to be teaching the 2 most important things for your immune system that nobody talks about hardly. And in my opinion, that's your rock. That's where you start. You know, if you really want an intelligent, adaptive immune system, it's not just about, oh yes, you know, you need your vitamin D for your immune system. Oh, that's boring. No, you want a highly adaptive, intelligent immune system. So when all those superbugs come around, it's just like not a problem for you. And guess what? I've been teaching this for 40 years, and even 40 years ago, I said, guys, get your immune system strong. You got to do every day, you got to do a little bit of something for your immune system, because there's going to be always like these little superbugs appearing now and again, right? If you get that immune system up, you don't have to worry about colds and flus and all of these superbugs. You get really, really intelligent immune system. And a key word there, your take home straight away, is the medicinal mushrooms, which I'm going to get into. But that's what you're going to get into, guys. Get that reishi happening, get that shaga happening, etc. Don't muck around, do it straight away. Now, we're going to be talking about some really other interesting dynamics in terms of longevity science in the what I call the renaissance of nutrition. Quite frankly, Western nutrition has been really, 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 really boring up until about 7 or 10 years ago, when the multi-billion-dollar industry came in about anti-aging science, right? Now, Western nutrition is suddenly becoming very, very interesting, very, very dynamic. You know, so let me make the distinction. I'm mainly from an energetic background. We use yin and yang and constitutional energies. We talk about eating with the seasons. We talk about warming and cooling foods. We talk about building blood, building JING. That's the energetic side. The Western nutritional side is the reductionist thinking. It's like you're going to draw a vitamin C, you're going to draw all the proteins up on the board, you're going to keep researching that, and you still don't know what to eat for breakfast, right? That's the Western, a lot of Western nutrition was actually done 100 years ago. Fascinating stuff to learn and to read about. We actually don't bother incorporating it into our curriculum because it's easy to read about. The point I'm making is that it's really exciting now to Western nutrition because of the anti-aging science that's starting to happen and the billions of dollars that are being spent on, you know, for instance, the mitochondria, the telomeres, etc. Now, I've been following this research for a long, long time, and guess what? All they're doing is stumbling across all these tonic herbs that we've been using for thousands of years in Chinese medicine, true story, and detecting the active ingredient out of it. To give you a classic example, the gynostemma tea. Gynostemma has been used for thousands of years in Chinese medicine. Gynostemma is a powerful anti-aging tea. And they've discovered that the active ingredients out of gynostemma are just absolutely wonderful for maintaining the mitochondria. So what they do is they take it out of, make a supplement and sell it to you for $1,000, whereas basically you could just be drinking the tea for like $10, right? Don't worry, guys. All these things that I'm throwing up at you, I've got a good reference. I won't forget where you can buy it, resources and all of that. So don't panic, we'll get there. The point I'm making is there's some really, really interesting things happening. So we put out the Telostep, which is a telomere enhancer. And Dr. Marco Rugliero, who we actually had at one of our conferences, Breakthru Technology conferences, but in actual fact, incredibly famous guy. He created the term, the third brain, he's an absolute expert on the microbiome. He's created this Klotho formula, which I'm going to be talking about, which Klotho is the #1 longevity hormone in the body. Nobody knows about it. Hardly anybody, if you say Klotho to them, they go, oh, what's that? And because it's actually only being discovered in the last 15 or 20 years, this one, right? And he created this formula called the Immortalis. And we're going to be talking about the Theraphi, anti-aging aspects of the Theraphi. In my opinion, you start to put all of this together with, of course, exercise, fresh air, positive attitude, stress reduction and all of that, you'll live way beyond 120. So let's get into it. Okay, this is a little bit about my training. As I've mentioned, we put the East and West kind of theme together, but we draw on time-tested philosophies and theories around food as medicine. And as mentioned, yes, been involved with teaching thousands of students, clients, and actually been giving these seminars to probably over 70 countries in the good old days of travel. Remember that word, travel? You might remember that. Very much into experiential side with food as medicine, no dogma, no fads, no extremes, no calorie counting. Throw that out. It's a waste of time. Yeah. Open mind and experiment. But yeah, you need to learn some new tricks, new ingredients, and some, new skills. So moving on. So like a little bit of difference between the West. The energetic side, we're very much into the theme of chi and prana, and which in a way you can just use the word information. Prana or chi is about information. It's a hot day. I'm feeling cold, right? That's information. And for us, that's a type of chi, right? And we very much use the 5-element theory, which is the organ groups. It's called associative thinking. So suddenly now the organs are no longer just a piece of meat like they are in the West, in Western medicine. They're absolutely just a piece of meat. No, the organs are emotional, spiritual, psychological attributes. And all of Chinese Taoist medicine is geared up to strengthen and maintain the essences of the organs. It's very much geared up for that. So that's what the C's, the 5-element is for. It taps you into the various cooking styles, being able to have a powerful guide to eat with the seasons, to work with the 5 elements of the body when they get out of balance, which is the basis of diagnosis, etc. And, we just use some simple things like, damp forming foods or drying foods or warming foods or cooling, etc. And then people's condition, that's the way they think about it. That's the way they feel. That's the way I express these conditions. I feel heavy. I feel sluggish. I feel slow. I feel too overactive. Whereas in the West, big fan of Western medicine, but it's as far as actually having it as a protocol, it's way down the end of the list in the sense that we use food as medicine, a change of attitude, experiment with herbs, exercise, stress reduction, massage, acupuncture, etc. Then if all of that doesn't work, then you actually start again with it and change things around. And if all of that doesn't work, then of course, there's a place for Western medicine. Obviously, really, really good for emergencies, but not very good for chronic diseases, as you know. Can be quite good for some acute things going on, yes, but for us, it's way down the end of the list. One very, very important aspect here that the Eastern Taoist approach is very, and by the way, our Western esoteric approach, which we've all forgotten about, very similar to the Eastern cultures, as was our Western esoteric approach, was about self-awareness, self-mastery, right? So it's more of an inner approach of self-reflection and making these dynamic changes and learning about the universe that you're in, rather than going to a specialist, which is what the tendency is to do in our culture. You get a problem, you go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you a pharmaceutical, a drug for that headache or for that sleeping problem. And as you know, that's a billion dollar industry just there. So we've got a radically different approach to all of that. Moving on, this is just a little diagram of the 5 elements. Water, think of it as the seasons, like water is the winter time, spring is wood, rising energy. It goes to its peak, summer, or same scale, like a fractal, is a 24-hour that's the noon time, which is the same as the longest day of the year, fire, get the idea? The summer solstice. Then energy, this is just yin and yang, slowed down. So now your yin energy is like the afternoon chi, the evening, earth and metal, back to water, right? This is a complete direct relationship to nature. This is what goes on in nature. Energy moves up to its peak, and then energy moves down to its peak, right? So it's out of the 5 elements that we get all these associations, like these become organ groups, etc. Now, what we're going to focus on today is the water element, which remember is the nighttime or the winter time, and that's associated with seed, right? The seeds are in the ground, so that's associated, that winter dark energy, it's the color black, that's very much associated with the so-called JING foods that I'm going to be talking about later, because they enhance the kidney chi. And now the kidney chi is where your ancestral energy is housed, right? Your kidney chi houses the JING, the constitutional energy, right? So just keep that in mind for when we get to some more detail. Just very quickly, you know, we talk about the 5 thieves, you know, like excess cold foods can really rob the chi of the kidneys. We are not into the raw food diet, right? It's a really extreme diet, right? And if it's snowing outside, the last thing you need is a whole lot of raw food. If it's really, really hot outside, then you need some more raw food because of its cooling action. So when you take too much cold food, it takes away your digestive fire and it weakens your kidneys, and all hell breaks loose. That when you get that excess cold in the body, you get a lot of pain, a lot of stuck energy, and it's another way of leaking your jing, right? And we have concepts like too much dampness or moisture, and concepts like too much dry environmental energy, and these all upset the organ groups, right? So we have foods, temperatures, we have organs in these groups, and we have these thieves that also rob the body of its vital energies. Bit of detail there to study, but I'm just throwing it at you for now. Everything is about the organ groups, like they're like a yin and yang pairing. So the very dense organs like the kidneys are paired with a more hollow organ like the bladder. So that's your basic yin and yang of the body. Yin is more dense, right? Concentrated. And the yang is more open. So we are made up of, the universe is made up of yin and yang energies, and we're just a mirror image of these heaven and earth, cosmological and earth energies. Total reflection of that. Now, for our work today, I a lot of the herbs and foods are geared up for these things. Clinically in Chinese medicine, we're just working with blood or moisture, blood essence a lot, and we're working with qi energy a lot. So clinically it's called qi and blood, right? We're also working with the JING energy, right? And then within this framework, there's the so-called spirit or the psychological mental functionings. So we even have foods that operate really well on the spirit. And then, of course, there's a certain amount of lubrication that you need for your skin and your nails and your hair and your mouth, etc., for it to be naturally moist, right? So we have pretty much these 5 essences, substances that we work with that we want to get into balance. A lot of disease and a lot of symptoms come from imbalances. Like we have concepts like blood deficiency. We have concepts of like stuck qi. We have restless shun, which is like excess dreaming, or etc. So today we'll talk a little bit about diet, Jing, not so much lifestyle and exercise because of time. Obviously, we've been talking about fasting for the last 40 years. If you really want to accelerate your healing, fasting is the way to go. However, long-term fasting is, if you're already deficient and you get into this long-term fasting or excess fasting that modern writers are starting to talk about, and for most people, they find it looks good on the book, but most people find it incredibly difficult to do. And if you've got blood sugar problems, it's even going to be very difficult to do. And if you've got deficiencies already, they're going to get worse. So you have to be careful with the type of fasting you do. Just start like with a little bit. I call it the 24-hour fast. You just like, you have breakfast and lunch, and then you might skip the meal that night, and then skip breakfast and lunch the next day. So a quick 24-hour fast is very good to do from time to time. But you do a lot of, when you get into this dietary approach, you do a lot of natural fasting, which is like you generally don't eat late at night. Your blood sugars get really good, and your ability to go for a lot longer without food increases, right? So there's, you don't have to go to these extremes. One little thing I'd leave you with, if you are going to do a little bit more long-term, 2, 3, 4 days, do it in summer when the yang energy is there. It's so much easier to eat lighter. Don't do it in spring, which is the traditional thinking of this. Spring is a time where you should binge like crazy on all the fresh herbs and like all that wood energy coming out, right? All that new growth, all those wonderful salads and raw foods and pickles, etc., because your liver is going to love it. Then go for that little bit longer fast in the summer qi, right? When the yang energy is high, so much easier to do, and it's less destructive on the body. Superfoods, we're going to talk about supplements, Theraphi. Okay, so one thing that Weston Price discovered was that traditional people ate high quality fats and they weren't shy about it. So for the last 40 years, I've been teaching people and going through, I need a little bit of time. I need 3-4 hours in the training to go through what are our traditional fats, what happened, why I am not teaching a low-fat diet for so many reasons. And this is where my ego comes out. They're finally catching up with us. Have you noticed that all the modern sort of cutting edge trends around nutrition is going like, oh, sorry, this is the Western nutritionist. Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. The low-fat diet did not work. And then within that, they've been pushing all the vegetable oils for the last, 50, 60, if a bit longer, actually. There's a lot of naughtiness going on there, big time, because of the mono-agriculturists and the propaganda of TV in the 60s and the industrialists really needing to push a lot of the vegetable oils onto the market, right? And it's created absolute havoc, high omega-6 inflammatory, it's been an absolute disaster. And that's where a lot of the health problems, cancer, obesity, etc. So stop it. Don't eat your vegetable oils, maybe a little bit. But get back to your traditional oils. Now, if you're more vegan, vegetarian, there's still some really good options there. You know, I've been talking about coconut oil for 40 years because I went to Indonesia and they were all healthy and they were all eating coconut oil and their skin was beautiful. And their statistics at that time, this is like 35, 40 years ago, they were pretty good. Unfortunately, as a culture, Bali and Indonesia is now starting to have all these cheap vegetable oils around. And of course, their dietary statistics, their health statistics are falling. So look to your traditional oils and fats. So coconut is good, olive oil is good. Now, I would add some more onto that, like some of the, if you're not vegetarian, then your traditional lards and tallow, etc., and your duck fats, etc. Fantastic. If you want to build essence, JING, if you want to build your hormonal strength, and here's the trick: if you start using those rich fats again, back into your saute, back into your soup, back into your using your ghee into your rice, your blood sugars, fats do not spike your blood sugars. They're like this, right? So guess what? Your energy level goes for several hours that day. You don't feel hungry. You feel totally satisfied, right? And you're building the JING, etc. So just start off slowly again. If you've been on that corruptive, low-fat diet, do not be scared of them. Get back into them, dabble with them, experiment with them. You can still use some walnut is good. It's a JING oil in Chinese medicine. Pumpkin seed oil is fantastic as well. There's some new ones coming out like avocado, which is quite nice for salads. But staff of life is olive, coconut, and then your traditional saturated fats. Now, one thing you're going to learn about today is centripetal force and JING foods, right? And you know, when you have those fats, remember grandma would have those fats lying around next to a stove and they never went off, right? Whereas if you get vegetable oils, they go off pretty quickly, don't they? Within 3 or 4 days, they're rancid. So something's telling you straight away, do not eat this. Right? So you want those centripetal forces, right? If you want to be centripetal, as Dan Winter would say. So that whole science that Dan's been teaching about negentropy and entropy translates perfectly into some foods are strong with this holding energy, like grain. Grain, you can find 7,000 to 8,000 years old from the pyramids, throw it into the ground and it'll start growing again. If you get your miso, you come back to it in 7 years' time, what do you have? Your miso. If you buy your coconut oil, come back into the cupboard in 7 years' time, what do you have? Without any what? Bacteria on it. Get the idea? Strong centripetal energy there. JING, strong life force. We use sea vegetables for many, many reasons. Remember, we're into these black foods, very good for the JING, very good for the kidneys. And sea vegetables are naturally detoxifying to the body and full of the trace minerals that your immune system and your body needs. So don't muck around. Buy a cookbook that has some recipes for seaweeds, right? Just straight away tomorrow, seaweeds. Now, I'm going to show you how you can start using some seaweeds very casually. No, it's a no-brainer. I've got some kombu here that I'm going to show you that you're going to start to use in your stocks. And I always say the secret to longevity is in the stock, right? So the longest living people on the planet were from Okinawa, which Weston Price actually studied, that Japanese fishing village, right? And of course they had the seafood eating tribes were the longest living people. The next, of course, were the animal foods, eating people, and the worst in terms of longevity were some vegetarian tribes from India. The vegetarian wasn't around until about 100 years ago. Vegetarianism was created out of cruelty to animals. It wasn't like a health thing at that time in England. It was created out of the husbandry around animals changing. So the longest living people were the fish-eating tribe. And of course, they had their fermented foods like miso and tamari. They had fresh garden vegetables, and they had their beans, and they had their grain. They didn't actually have rice. They had buckwheat and millet. So every longevity culture has been using some sort of complex carbohydrate. To throw out a whole food group like complex carbohydrates, with which a lot of modern writers do, is virtually criminal as far as I'm concerned. Now, there are issues around grain eating, and that's because people don't have the wisdom anymore about how to soak them, sprout them, prepare them, make them digestible, add other things into them to get that power released into your body. They are a JING food, remember? Grains store for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There's something restorative about that. So it's just a matter of learning some tricks to get back into that. If you're, now, of course, the modern thing about gluten and all that, yes, there's some real things going on there because of the absolute poor quality. You're better off getting rid of those foods anyway, but there are some traditional breads that where the gluten is broken down really, really nicely and actually becomes an enzyme-rich food like Essene bread, which is the sprouted wheat bread, fantastic. And things like traditional sourdough breads made from the traditional ancient grains, right? Anyway, so there's, you can see that there's a little bit to kind of practice there, right? So anyway, we better keep moving here. I've got homemade soups, stocks, and broths. So I was talking about that culture from Japan. So, and the point I was actually making then was the secret is in the stock to longevity. So they got fish bones, right? And they made the stock for the village out of the fish bones. And that stock went into everything. It went into when they were cooking their vegetables, it went into cooking their porridge, it went into, of course, making their miso soups and things like that. So as in French cooking, start making a good stock every week and use that because it's minerally rich and bioavailable, right? So we're very much into easy to digest foods like warm broths and soups and stocks, etc. That's very much the Taoist tradition because we're very much into strengthening that digestive fire, making through the alchemy of cooking, making foods digestible and that they can move and transform into the body very, very efficiently. That's the art of cooking. So what is JING? Primal life force, genetic, fundamental. When you have strong JIN, then you have resistance to disease. You have the strength to carry out your dreams and aspirations. You can deal with environmental stresses and things from time to time. Now, of course, some people are born a little bit more with delicate constitutions, some with strong, but there's a back to front to that because the strong constitution can get very, very arrogant about things like, oh, that doesn't matter, or food, nah, I can eat anything. A weaker constitution actually learns earlier on that they can't go to all of these extremes because they just get washed out, that they start to learn about what foods do support them, etc. So there's a big front and back to that. Some things just take your JING out, your inherited life force, like a lot of chemicals, pharmaceuticals, right? They just burn out your JING. Stressful environments, loud music, excess of sugar and alcohol and stimulants and nicotine and coffee. So in excess, right? You can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you know, especially if you're generally healthy, This is not a monk's diet, right? And we're very much into the joie de vivre, the really like the living and celebrating and not being ultimately fussy because around food, because your transmutation, your transformative energy becomes very, very strong. However, we're very cautious about these certain things because they leak your jing, they drain your jing, right? And then that's how aging happens rapidly, or that's how you get burnt out rapidly. For instance, those pop stars that always died at 27, they burnt out because of the drugs and the excesses in life. So being Taoist, we're very much about finding the middle way and going to extremes from time to time, but most of the time we love this idea of harmony and balance. And they are not boring words for us. Harmony and balance is something that you study for the rest of your life. Right? So here's some practical things. So things like nutrient-dense, real foods, high-quality fats and oils I've mentioned, things like reproductive energy, like eggs and fish eggs, etc., caviar, etc., very, very rich in the Jing force, right? Because that egg that is their Jing. There's so much dense nutrition there that it goes on to create the new animal, so to speak. Black bean soup, black minerally rich foods like sea vegetables. In Chinese medicine, we use this bone broth because the kidney energy strength, it controls the bones of the body. So when you use a bone food, like a bone broth, it strengthens your bones, but also strengthens your jing or your constitution. And obviously your bones are the structure of your constitution. Now, when you do use these bone broths, that's the way of getting some really great essential fatty acids and minerals back into your body. Even on top of that, it's incredibly anti-inflammatory. So those folks who have a lot of dietary problems, irritation, intestinal problems, etc., getting into the bone broths within 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, they have radical, and I say radical changes in their symptoms, right? They feel more comfortable, the irritation is going away, they get their strength back. So you might consider it a convalescing food. We consider it actually a day-to-day food, right? Now I've got here organ meats. This is where the vegans and vegetarians totally freak out and start throwing bricks at me. Now, it only took 1 or 2 generations for us to get away from organ meats. Now, all of those traditional longevity tribes cultures around the world, they all ate organ meats. Your grandfather and grandmother ate organ meats. I know my mother and father, my father grew up on a farm, right? And so it's only like 1 or 2 generations away where that was just natural. It was no big deal, right? And that's actually the most nutrient dense food, and it's full of jing. Now, of course, like here in Australia with Aboriginal people, when they hunted kangaroo, and boy, they hunted a lot of kangaroo, guess what? They didn't bother with the muscle meat. Modern people eat muscle meat all the time, and they turn their nose up at the heart and the kidneys and the liver. Well, traditional people, well, for one thing, they ate everything. Nothing was wasted. But basically, they would always go for the nutrient-dense organs, right? And the muscle, half the time, they didn't really bother about. Now, I realize that a lot of modern people don't like organ meats, and I don't eat much of them myself, actually, but occasionally throughout the year, right? I'm making the point that they have incredible healing energies to them. If you have deficiency in kidney and liver, like for instance, there's a syndrome called deficiency of liver blood, which can create things like Parkinson's disease, migraine headaches, big time. If you wanted to build the blood of the liver, then you take a little bit of liver within a dish. It doesn't take much, by the way. And you'd balance that out with some salad and some raw food and, you know, things like that. There's a way of balancing this out. But as far as this philosophy around this, understanding the philosophy, then yes, organ meats are very, very powerful in JING energy, right? Things like pollen, royal jelly, and of course, reishi. Reishi mushroom is a JING builder and a spirit builder. Then the black fermented foods like miso and tamari, very, very strengthening to the kidney JING. Moving on. Now, let's get into some of the herbs and a bit of check on the, boy, well, we did start late. I know we're coming up to 6 o'clock. Sorry, that was Sydney time. So we did start at 10 past the hour. So you're going to have to give me another 10, 15 minutes. Now, okay. So Hoshu Wu. So there's 2 herbs here, very easy to get hold of, that are considered like the #1 longevity herbs in Chinese medicine because they build kidney JING. Very easy to get hold of. See, Hoshu Wu. You can find that on the internet. You can also find it as a supplement from dragonherbs.com. Okay, there's your #1 resource there, dragonherbs.com. If you want your hair to remain strong and dark throughout life, then take Hoshu Wu every day. If you have sleep problems, take Hoshu Wu. If you're ungrounded, take Hoshu Wu, right? Now, the second one, Romania, basically you find at a Chinese Chinatown, and easy to find in Chinatown, or even over the internet, you'll find it, or an Asian food store. And it comes up like this. See that? It's prepared, right? Deep JING energy, vegetarian, by the way. So is Hoshu Wu. Now, your #1 JING building, beautiful kind of coffee rich flavor. You get like 2 of these, throw it into some water. Here's what your astragalus looks like. Again, very, very easy to find. And this astragalus is the #1 immune builder in Chinese medicine. It builds the Wei Qi, W-E-I Qi, which is the defensive energy of the body. And we're going to be talking about this because out of this little baby here, a tiny little molecule is called cycloestrogenol, which is the #1 molecule to enhance the telomeres of the body. So far, you put this in, you put a half of this in, that's all you need. And in an Asian store, you can always get Chinese licorice. Now, if you don't like licorice, you don't have to use it. And quite frankly, if you do have high blood pressure, because this is quite yang in nature, if you have high blood pressure, you don't use the licorice, right? If you've got low blood pressure, please use the licorice, right? So it's just a lovely flavor enhancer. And then a blood builder is red dates. It's very common in Chinatown. Chinese people use these red dates all the time. See that? Red dates. Amazing spleen, blood builder, and JING builder. Throw all that together and it's actually a really, really delicious coffee alternative, right? So there's no caffeine in that. And very, very good, calming, strengthening, good for sleep. You can drink it at any time of the day. So we've got Romania, remember, a JING builder, right? We've got a little bit of astragalus, don't put the whole thing in because it's a little bit bitter. We've got some red dates, throw about 5 or 6 of them in. Touch of licorice, and of course, if you've got some goji berries lying around, you can put that in. Now, don't throw that out. You just add some water to it, and it'll keep giving for the next 3 to 4 days. And you get to a point where you go, I've had enough, throw it into the compost and start again. Right? Dongqua is the woman's precious pills. So Chinese women know this herb because it's very good for regulating menstruation. So it's a blood builder. So you can get that from a Chinese herbalist, often just as a pill form. Men can take this as well, because men can get blood deficient as well. You can show up with feeling like a little spaced out, pale complexion, dryness starting in the body. That's all blood deficiency. Okay, and there's some other exotic ones. There's actually about 20 that we need to study, but we won't have time today to get into that. Now I'm going to throw in carbon 60 here. Now, one website is c-60.com. They're pretty good, and the price is reasonable. Now, carbon 60 is it's just, fullerene or 60 sides, right? And it's a powerful antioxidant. Now, Glenn will agree with this. Basically, you've got the fullerene, and now you've got 60, so it's nano, and now you've got 60 vertices or sides that can react and exchange an electron as a powerful antioxidant or a powerful free radical scavenger. Big time, hundreds of times better than vitamin C. So now C60 is in Chinese medicine, because it's black with carbon, it's a JING food. Then in Western nutritional theory, it's a powerful antioxidant. So I would definitely add that into your protocol to live to 1,001 years, right? Easy to get hold of, it's not too costly. Unfortunately, the price, the propaganda machines got on there. Like 7 years ago, the price used to be around just $20 for one of those bottles, and now it's like, 50 or 60 bucks. And I think it's a little bit cheeky, because it should be coming down in price, not going up. By the way, carbon 60 is very easy to make, centrifuge, some graphene, and you throw it into some olive oil. So there's a bit of naughtiness going on there, because I've noticed that the price of carbon 60 is coming up, right? I almost feel like I should start to make it myself now. Now, here's a little trick for those who might have a little bit of inflammation, some pain, sleeping problems, any kind of irritation. What you do is you get your CBD oil. This is from Leyland. It's been that this cannabis it doesn't have the THC in it, so you can grow this in Australia now if you have a license. And so I add a whole drop full of this with a shot of the carbon 60, and swirl that around as long as you can before you go to sleep. So that whole action is moving through the body as you sleep. And, that's a time when you're getting rid of a lot of waste products and free radicals, etc. So that's actually a really, really good sleep protocol as well. I had a lower back problem through lifting something too quickly, and it went on for a couple of months. And it wasn't until that I got that protocol happening that I started to really get rid of that lower back problem. So here's your telestep. So telestep.com. It's a great website, lots of information up there. There's a webinar. In a nutshell, this has the cycloestrogenol, which is what you can use to enhance the length of the telomeres, because it triggers the telomerase. Basically, when we're born, we're full of telomerase, right? So that the cells can replicate, etc. But as we go through life, basically we end up with no telomerase, and so the cells aren't repairing them down on those telomeres. They get shorter and shorter. And by the way, that's the first clinical definition that we've got of aging and dying process. Up to then, it was just like, oh, you're not breathing and your heart has stopped. Oh, you must be dead, right? Now we've actually got a measurement of aging. On the website, telestep.com, under resources, there's life length. You can actually get your you get a little package you can send away with a little blood sample. You can actually get your biological age done through what's going on. They kind of give you an average of your telomere length, right? Start taking the telestep. It takes about a year to get an effect. Then do another test and prove it to yourself that it's working. Now, this is not exactly cheap, but it's not too expensive. It takes a lot of tons and tons of, you get the astragalus, and out of the astragalus, you make the astraglicide 4, and then out of the astraglicide 4, you make the cycloastrogenial. So this is usually $100 a month, we sell it. For those folks who are listening to this presentation or the recording within the next 2 weeks, let's see, by the 15th of this month, if you want a special deal on this, instead of $100 a month for 12 months supply, I'm going to sell it to you for $80. So you can get basically a free bottles. Instead of 12, you'll be making on the deal. So you can always email info@telestep.com and we'll honor that deal if you're into living to 120. That supplement I take religiously every day. Doesn't matter what's going on in life, I always take that one, no matter what. Okay, so there's your little, instead of $100, special offer for you guys for the conference. Astragicides 4, very, very powerful for the immune system. So remember this astragalus. So I actually like taking all of the astragalus. So I take it in this form. I actually take the astragicide 4 from Dragon Herbs called Advanced Astragalus, that formula. And then I take my telestep, right? So it's good to have that whole sort of banding spectrum from this family for your immune system. Your immune system just loves it, just soaks it up. Complementary to that is obviously things like ginseng and resveratrol and all these other things that you've heard of. Now here's the Klotho. Moving on. This is powerful. This is incredible. If somebody's on their deathbed, then get the Klotho happening for the next 2 to 3 months, and you can bring them back from the deathbed, right? Now it's a little expensive, but there are ways of, now we're talking like a couple of $1,000 for 4 months supply, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's not cheap. It's made very, very specifically, proven up to the eyeballs that it starts to create. You cannot inject yourself with Klotho, right? The only thing you can do is retrain your microbiome to start to produce it again out of the kidneys. Oh, isn't that funny? In the West, they've discovered, oh, Klotho, #1 longevity hormone. Oh, it's made in the kidneys. Oh, what have we been saying in Chinese medicine for thousands of years? You got to look after your kidney energy because that's your JING, that's your life force, that's your constitutional energy. And it just so happens that's where the Klotho is made, right? As I said, that sort of Western is always catching up to the ancient wisdoms, the ancient philosophies. So this is powerful stuff. Now, if you do get this, there's ways of stretching it out. Like you could get a capsule and put it into a yogurt and have that for 3 or 4 days. So there's a way of, because it's quite expensive, there's ways of, instead of just using it for 3 months, you could get that over 4 to 5 months, right? Now, if that's out of your price, again, you'd have to email me that and I send you the link, because guess what? I can get 20% off that. And you really do want the 20% off because it's a little pricey, this one. Now, if that's a little bit out of your price range, Marco also produced the Bravo yogurt. Marco is the hero of all the altruistic parents in America. You go to these conferences and there's thousands of parents there, right? Because they've been, altruism, as you know, used to be 1 in 500 children, and now it's 1 in 30. You got to ask yourself, what's going on? The modern diet is a disaster. You got to step away from that modern diet and get back to these wisdom traditions, right? Big time, fast, right? And he's been the keynote speaker there because the Bravo yogurt doesn't cost much. You can make it yourself, starts to retrain that microbiome, and their kids start to be able to converse, socialize, all sorts of things happen, right? And it's powerful with GC math. There's a lot of research done around GC math and its anti-cancer properties, big time, right? So that's a lot of homework there for you, just that. So get into your astragalus, get into your medicinal mushrooms. So your chaga, you can make a coffee out of it. Take a reishi supplement every day for the rest of your life. Doesn't cost much, reishi, right? Just have it with your food, right? And that will entrain your immune system to be clever, adaptive, and strong. And so you won't have to worry about all these things that other people worry about. And on a basic level, just when you're shopping, get some exotic mushrooms once a week. You know, like some, well, shiitake are not exotic. You should be using them in your soups, your broths, saute them. But, you know, some of the other exotic mushrooms, you know, they're full of polysaccharides, and your immune system just soaks up all of those polysaccharides. That's what nourishes the immune system. Now, if you have a neighbor, a friend, a mother, a daughter, that this is all too much and they suffer from immune deficiencies and colds and flus and all of that, then at least get beta, B-E-T-A, glucan from the supplement store. Beta glucan is what your immune system, it's the #1 enhancer to the immune system. Now, when we talk about these medicinal mushrooms, they have beta glucan, you know, in it, and they have a full spectrum of these beta glucans, right? Which is what you want for your immune system. When you go to the supplement store, you just buy that very cheap beta glucan, but boy, it's just 1 or 2 spectrums. It's a narrow range, but boy, even that can do wonders for somebody who's always suffering from colds and flus and things like that. Beta glucan, and #1 enhancer for the immune system. Okay. Theraphi. So in the original material of the Theraphi, which goes back to priori days in the late 1960s and 70s, which you know, we've studied a lot. So he's sitting around and he notices a bowl of fruit that he had. This is priori, right? Before he started to build his priori machine, the fruit didn't go off. And, you know, he sort of noticed after like 5-6 weeks, right? And it was sitting next to some electrical equipment that he actually had, right? And so that inspired him to build the prototype priori machine, right? And as we've explained in some of our other broadcasts, that they didn't quite know the science, they didn't know phase conjugation, this coherent energy. So we've just talked about the sort of food side, the herbal side. It's still chemistry, right? We haven't talked about the electromagnetic side, and that's where the Theraphi comes in. So to complete that whole picture about the powerful anti-aging protocol, the Theraphi, because of its centripetal charge and its coherent energy, keeps all the systems in a coherent way. And at the end of the day, that's what health is, that's resilience to disease, that's the mind-body connection, all of that. So the Theraphi, as you know, we're doing some more talks on that. Some folks might be new to the Theraphi. Theraphi.tech is a lot of good history there, etc. You can read up on it as well. And of course, we have these wonderful Theraphi and breakthrough technology conferences. We might have one of them next year. A little bit more about the Academy. Wonderful team. Nam Singh, Taoist priest who grew up in Taiwan in a monastery, food as medicine. This is the only guy that I know who can teach the culinary arts of using some of these herbs. Alifa is a pioneer, best-selling author in Asian health secrets and Ayurveda. Inga is a master with alchemy and superfoods and making elixirs, and she's the main cooking teacher. So we cover a lot in the curriculum, all sorts of food preparations, healing protocols, you name it. We cover it. Oh, there's your Romania. You see the Romania? Anyway, moving on. I think I've run out of time. So this course, so it's a professional training course. We actually teach people the business side of this, how they can become a longevity diet specialist or health coach, to take people off that terrible Western diet. People need time and a lot of input to do that. It's not an easy thing to break out of those habits that you've had since childhood. You know? So, which is why the course goes for 1 year. On the average punter, it takes about 1 year to get into these new positive habits. So we've had people from all sorts of backgrounds doing the training over many, many decades. Lots of great course materials and lots of really good mentorship and support from the team. And we have a course that just started last month in October, but you can still join that. Remember, it's just 1 weekend a month. That's the way it's paced out. Otherwise, the training starts again in April. It's all online now, so easy to do from all over the world. So that's my time is up. I can take some questions, very quick questions, because we're running over time. Yep, yeah, go for it. You have to unmute yourself. Yep.
That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, do you have a question?
Not really. I just emailed you about getting the Klotho and the TEL step. Is there anything else you could recommend for us?
That's a good place to start.
Okay.
I can talk to you more about it over the email.
About it later. And anything else like those mushrooms? Which mushrooms?
Where do you live in California? You'll get them. Oh no, you're in where are you? Las Vegas.
Atlanta, yeah? Georgia.
Oh yeah. Oh, dragonherbs.com.
Okay.
But we can talk. I'll give you a bit more resources over the email. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again for this presentation.